Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Foster, and I'm the Terracore member for the Attleboro Land Trust. Welcome back to another episode of the ALT's live series on Facebook, all about land conservation and protection in the city of Attleboro. I'm very excited today to introduce our guest, Nick Wyllie. Nick is the environmental planner and conservation agent for the city and has served in this role since 2017. Prior to working for the city, he was a resident of Attleboro for 24 years. Nick currently holds a Bachelor of Science in Earth Systems from UMass Amherst and a graduate certificate in Sustainable Environmental Planning and Management from UConn. He is currently in graduate school at UConn to earn his master's in Engineering and Environmental Management. So with that, I will pull up Nick's presentation and I will let him take it away.
All right. Thank you, Evan. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to come on and teach you all about living near wetlands and some best management practices to know when you are living near wetlands or any other resource areas. So, Evan, if you'd like to move on to the next slide for me. Thank you. So to start us off, what does the Conservation Commission do? I get asked this question very frequently from both residents and non-residents. So the three core things that we do is we administer and implement the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. We implement Attleboro's local wetlands protection ordinance, as well as Attleboro's stormwater management ordinance. Each one of these laws is designed to help protect our natural resources and improve water quality to provide numerous benefits to not only the residents, but also the wildlife that we coexist with here in the city. So implementing these laws, we issue various permits or determinations to determine if work that is being proposed is even applicable to the Wetlands Protection Act or any of our local ordinances. Evan, go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the other question I always get, why are wetlands so important? So wetlands are critical ecosystems. We see them all across the country and all across the world. Wetlands, encompass swamps, bogs, marshes. You have local wetlands along our coasts that are very important for storm damage prevention, flood control, pollution prevention, as well as drinking water. Most importantly, wetlands act as a natural sponge to help soak up water from storms. They also act as a natural filter. So wetlands can help filter out a lot of the pollutants that may otherwise contaminate our drinking water. And the more we protect our wetlands and the more filtration that they are providing means less money that is spent at our water treatment plants in decontaminating water and making it safe for us to drink. So that's just a little bit of a few reasons why wetlands are so important. And just for people's reference, the other question I get asked a lot about wetlands is, what are the jurisdictional areas? So for any wetland that may border on a body of water, what we would refer to as a bordering vegetated wetland, in Massachusetts, anything within 100 feet of a wetland is within the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, and anything within 200 feet of a perennial stream, and by perennial I mean it has water running through it year-round, is also within the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction. So, Evan, next slide, please. So, what can residents do to help protect wetlands and water quality? So first thing you can help do is stabilize any exposed soil that may exist on your property. One of the main issues we see, and this is mostly applicable to any active construction sites, is exposed soil runs the risk of running off into wetlands or streams or into our storm drains during rainstorms. What happens with that is as sediment builds up, it may cover up some of the existing vegetation, impact water quality and pH levels, and contain any other contaminants or pollutants that may destabilize those critical ecosystems. The other thing residents can do is reduce the use of pesticides and fertilizers on your properties. In particular, any phosphorus-based fertilizers can be especially harmful to wetlands in our local waterways. what they do is cause nutrient loading to enter the water, increases the acidity of the water, but that excess nutrients allows algal blooms and invasive species to really take hold and kill off a lot of the native plants and species that may inhabit our local ecosystems. Also, properly dispose of trash. It's unfortunate that during a lot of my site visits, I do encounter trash in these wetlands, particularly plastics, tires, and sports equipment, such as soccer balls, footballs. While those may not be trash, properly taking care of your household items and making sure they don't go into our wetlands is always encouraged. Pick up and properly dispose of pet waste. So pet waste can contain a lot of bacteria as well as some other contaminants that we don't want to see running off into the adjacent wetlands. So best management practice when it comes to pet waste, pick it up in a bag and put it in your trash for it to be picked up weekly. Do not throw it into the woods or the wetlands. Preferably pick it up and put it in your trash. Also, do not put pet waste into any of the catch basins or storm drains you see on the street. Unfortunately, that has become an occurrence in some areas around the city, and that causes a whole other mess of issues within our storm drain system, aside from just the water quality pollution issues. But those plastic bags can block and clog some of the pipes and cause flooding in certain areas. Next, what can residents do is properly manage your yard waste. A lot of people I see will just create one large pile to put all their yard waste in. And if you're not near a wetland, that's not as big of an issue. But what tends to happen is I do encounter a lot of people that will just dump any sort of grass clippings or leaves, sticks, will concentrate into a single pile into an adjacent wetland. Again, that goes back to nutrient loading as well as sedimentation. You're essentially filling in a wetland concentrated area of nutrients that's going to increase the pH level and affect that very critical ecosystem in a negative way. So please properly manage your yard waste. We do have a compost center here in Attleboro. I highly recommend that any residents take advantage of that compost center. But if you don't want to take advantage of the compost center, I'd also recommend getting your own compost barrel. Not only will that help properly manage your yard waste, you can utilize the composted soil in gardens, and it'll be full of good, healthy nutrients for your gardens. Next thing, and I cannot stress this enough, is protect the mature trees on your property. Mature trees not only have the great benefit of sequestering CO2 and providing us with plentiful oxygen, they also provide shade, which is critical for a lot of our waterways. If we reduce shade more and more on our waterways, then we run the risk of increasing the temperature in the water. Rising temperatures increases the chance of algal blooms from being able to thrive in those waterways. So it is critical to protect mature trees and other forms of mature vegetation that may be adjacent to wetlands and other waterways. So in addition to maybe living near a wetland, one of the other things that residents should always keep in mind is, where is the stormwater from your property heading to? If it's not heading towards a wetland, is it heading into a local storm drain? If you'll see on the current slide, I do have a little infographic that shows where runoff may be heading towards. More likely than not, your local storm drain that may be out on your street is discharging into a direct wetland or into one of our local rivers. So it's critical that you manage runoff properly to ensure that we're reducing the amount of pollutants that are going into our waterways. Because eventually that water is going to come back to us in some form. So as I stressed before, the more we can filter out the water and improve water quality before it gets into our waterways, then the less money we're going to be required to spend for decontamination of drinking water in the future. All right, so Evan, next slide. So this is our stormwater motto. And the motto is, got three things there: slow it down, spread it out, and soak it in. Important to remember if you're trying to manage it on your own property, but I don't think I need to go into that any further. Next slide, Evan. So one of the easiest and most effective ways to manage stormwater on a residential property is through the construction of a rain garden. The most common way I see people managing stormwater is simply they have a gutter, it gets directed towards the downspout, and then maybe there's a little bit of a splash pad. The only issue with that is once it hits that splash pad, it's still going to follow whatever the grade of your property is, and maybe that's running towards a wetland, running towards a neighbor's property, or running off into the street. So constructing a rain garden, which is also known as a bioretention area, helps keep that rain and any of that stormwater on your property. Not only that, but going into a rain garden that's filled with, say, native plants will help filter out that water and infiltrate it to help recharge underground aquifers and groundwater. So these are critical in helping prevent pollution and just keeping stormwater in the same general area of where it is falling. And so one piece of information, so 1 inch of rain on a 2,000 square foot roof, for example, would equal 1,250 gallons of water. To get you a general idea of if we have a good rainstorm, how much water may be actually falling on your property. And that water has to go somewhere. So installation of a rain garden can be a great way of making sure it is managed properly. Evan, if you go to the next slide, show a cross section of a rain garden to just give you a general idea of how this would work. So you still keep your gutter system and all that, but preferably do not pipe it any further than where you need to. The minute you put stormwater into a pipe, you are increasing its velocity. The more you increase its velocity means you're going to have a greater chance for erosion. So that brings us back to our stormwater motto of you want to slow it down. So in order to slow it down, what you can do is construct what's known as a swale. These are typically shallow depressions, maybe 1 foot wide, 6 to 12 inches deep. They can be either made of entirely of grass, or they can be made out of small rocks or gravel. And the idea is the grass or the gravel will help slow it down, filter out some of the sedimentation and maybe any other contaminants prior to it getting into your rain garden or some other kind of constructed stormwater basin. You fill that rain garden up with the native plants that have a deep root system. That'll help filter out any of the other contaminants that may be in there. And then typically your rain garden will have some kind of a bowl or basin shape that will be able to hold a certain quantity of water. Depending on the quantity of water you're holding is going to depend on what your soil types look like. Are they even good enough for infiltration? And the depth will determine can it handle a 5, 10, 25, or 100-year storm. All right, next slide, Evan. So not every property is going to be able to construct a rain garden. As I said, it's largely going to depend on the soil conditions, or you may not just have the space depending on what part of the city you live in. So there are some other methods that may be applicable if you don't have a whole lot of space. And one of those would be rain barrels. So rain barrels are a great way to store that water. And if you have a garden or some plants, you can reuse that water for later to water those. Dry wells typically don't take up as much room as a full-scale rain garden. Again, the dry well will typically depend on if you have suitable soil, though. But those are a great way to infiltrate water back into aquifers. One of the most important things you can do is, again, utilize native plants. Not only are they great for soaking up water, they are great for wildlife. And Evan, if you go to the next slide, we have a list of native trees. So the list before you is a list of native trees that was put together by our Conservation Commission. All these trees are specifically handpicked to be suitable for residential areas, not only for their wildlife benefits, but we also made sure to take size into account, because I know a lot of people get worried about sometimes some of those 40 or 50-foot trees they may have adjacent to their properties. And understandably, as they start swaying in the wind and some of those increased storms, they can be a little scary to watch sometimes. So sometimes some of the smaller trees may be more suitable if people are worried about wind damage from those trees. So in addition to trees, though, we also have a very exhaustive list of native shrubs that is provided by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Evan, if you go to the next slide, I just have a little snippet of that. So on the Department of Environmental Protection's website, they have probably about maybe 40 or 50 shrubs total on there that are all great for wildlife habitat. And they also filter them out depending on what the soil type. So whether it's dry soils or wet soils, they give you a good idea of what would be best to use there. So I've also provided the link to that below that slide. And I'm happy to share that with anyone if you email me as well. And additionally, I'm happy to share the list that I posted on the last slide too. If people would like to email me, I can provide that as well. And with that, I'll take any questions that people may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick, for all that information. It's definitely helpful to hear it and to let folks know about the various different factors that go into it. So I have a couple of questions. I was wondering, start with a more personal question. Why are you kind of passionate about this work, and what gets you excited about protecting wetlands and kind of these natural areas?
So one of the reasons I'm so passionate about conservation work is where I grew up here in the city. We had about an acre of land as my backyard, and on one side was this beautiful emergent wetland area where we used to hear spring peepers every year. Just such a vivid memory of hearing just the first sign of spring being all the peepers just having this beautiful chorus, and it was almost like clockwork. They would always start at 6 o'clock at night, and it was just something about that sound has really stuck with me. And then so that was on the right side of my backyard, and then on the left side of my backyard was a large pond where we used to go, ice skating in the winters, kayaking in the summers. We used to go fishing there, and just immense biodiversity in my backyard. You had mallards, snapping turtles, Painter's turtles. Although these are not native, we had Canadian geese. We had a pair of swans on there. At one point, we did have an otter as well. Numerous kinds of fish. So, grown up living near wetlands all my life has really given me a passion for conservation and protection of those natural resources, because I just have such vivid childhood memories. But also living in the city for the first 24 years of my life gives me even more of a passion to help protect Attleboro's resources.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely have lots of those similar memories of just being outside and really appreciating the outdoors and nature. So I wanted to kind of in line with what you were saying. I know that like frogs and salamanders, these wetlands and specifically vernal pools are so important to them. You were kind of just listing some animals, but and other species that really rely on these wetlands. Do you want to just kind of talk a little bit more about the importance that they play in these species' lives?
Yeah. So I didn't mention it during my my presentation, but vernal pools are another type of wetland that are probably the most sensitive of all the natural resources we protect. So vernal pools are specific wetland areas where various species, that's the only place you will find them breeding. These would consist, some of those species that you would find in there would be wood frogs, spotted salamanders, fairy shrimp, as well as some other amphibians and insects. But those are just probably some of the 3 key indicator species. These species are also known as bioindicators. So they all play an important part in the food chain and the food web of each ecosystem. So if we have a certified vernal pool somewhere where we know, yes, there was, we've seen spotted salamanders every year after year. And then if we start to see a decline in the population of the spotted salamanders over there, then we know there's something going on in the ecosystem that's throwing off the balance. So we take that indicator species, we start doing some tests on their environment. The first thing we would do is a surface water quality test of the vernal pool to see, okay, is it the vernal pool that's been affected? If that's not coming back with any specific chemicals, or even if it is, the next thing we're going to do is look at the surrounding area. Has there been some new development? Is there current construction activities that aren't managing their runoff properly that might be having some negative effects on the pH levels of the water. So that's where those species play an important role. Because wetlands are so sensitive to change, it's one of the reasons why we need to provide them increased protection.
Awesome. And then kind of just continuing with the same thread, what are some things that I guess, and you've kind of already mentioned it, but one of the bigger threats to, the health of these wetlands, you want to just kind of elaborate a little more on that?
Typically, the cutting down of mature vegetation that surrounds them, and then what kind of goes almost in hand with that is stormwater pollution runoff, or polluted stormwater runoff, I should say. As we start to cut down more of the natural buffers around wetlands, we reduce a lot of the natural filtration of the water that may be entering those wetlands. Additionally, we'd be reducing the shade, but any sort of polluted runoff, and probably the most common form of that polluted runoff is fertilizers coming from lawns. Once it enters our waterways, it's going to throw off the pH value, and it's going to give invasive species more of a leg up on the native species, because the invasive species can handle the increased amount of nutrients, whereas some of those native plants, it might be too acidic for them, and they will either stunt their growth or they'll just start to die off.
Great. Yeah, and then so I just keep going with it. So the wetlands, they're definitely connected to the health of the land around as well. They're not just when you protect a wetland, you're also protecting a lot of the area around it. Do you want to just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that's where, when I mentioned before, 100-foot buffer zone comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So that 100-foot buffer zone is attributed to the state's Wetlands Protection Act. So that doesn't mean you can't develop in there. It just means you need to submit an application. And what the Conservation Commission does is review that application to see if it's going to have any significant adverse impacts on the wetland. And then we have our local wetlands protection ordinance, which actually affords a 25-foot wetland protection zone. So that wetland protection zone has a little bit higher performance standards than what the state offers under the Wetlands Protection Act. So it typically ends up being a no disturb zone, as long as the quality of that area still has significant benefits. However, there is many cases where we have a previously developed area where it might be fully impervious area, such as a parking lot, or it's an old building that may be within that wetlands protection zone. And then we will allow redevelopment in there, again, as long as it's not going to produce any significant adverse impacts in the adjacent resource area.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, tying it back to what you were saying in your presentation, where, residents really do have the ability to help with this work, and it somewhat does start, or at least part of it starts right at your house. So there are certainly things that you can do to assist with this work and protect, wetlands and all these areas that we've been discussing today that are so critical.
Yeah. I mean, what I would, if anyone asked me, what can I do right now? Plant more native trees. That's, I think, my go-to suggestion for the time being. The more native plants you can put on your own property, reduce your fertilizers. That's just going to have net benefits on the entire ecosystem around you.
Awesome. And I did put that link in for the native shrubs, I believe, in the chat. So people are welcome to check that out. Yeah, definitely encourage you to plant those native plants. They're very important.
Yeah.
And we definitely know the struggle with the invasive fight against invasives. It's always
that's a fight that never ends, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, great. I want to just end with if you have like a favorite type of animal, or maybe a plant or something that lives specifically in wetlands. It also doesn't have to live in wetlands. If you have something else you're super passionate about or want to talk about, this is your chance.
Let's see. My favorite animal.
One of your favorite.
Honestly, it might be a tie between snapping turtles and a blue spotted salamander. So the blue spotted salamander is actually listed as a rare species here in Massachusetts, and incredibly difficult to find. But when you do see one, it's just an incredible animal. I think it also helps that blue is my favorite color, so maybe that's one of the reasons why that's up there as well.
There you go. Have you seen any in Attleboro before or no?
So I've seen a hybrid of a blue spotted and a Jefferson, also rare. I've never seen a full blue spotted salamander yet. I know they do exist because I have seen the natural heritage and endangered species reports, but I've only seen the hybrid version. So I've gotten close, but never still haven't seen the full thing. I think it's one of the reasons why I think that species is cool, is just because at the moment it's kind of elusive.
Yeah. That's great. Awesome. Well, before I wrap up, is there anything else you kind of, like to mention that you didn't, or anything else?
No, I touched upon all the major points. But what I would strongly encourage anyone that's viewing or listening to this, any questions at all about what you can do to improve your environment or improve stormwater management on your property, feel free, call me, email me. I'm happy to give you some tips on what you can do to improve water quality and help protect Attleboro's natural resources.
Awesome. And your contact info can be found on the City of Attleboro website. Is that correct?
Yep. So if you go to boards and commissions on the City of Attleboro webpage, go under Conservation Commission. That's where you can find my contact information. Both my phone number and my email will be on there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for that great presentation. There's lots of very helpful and useful knowledge that was shared. I do want to just mention two things. So there is a Attleboro Land Trust work party happening on the Richardson property tomorrow from 9 to 12. So if folks are interested and want to come help out, it'll be some invasive species removal, like we were just talking about, and some painting of the bearer's house. I also just want to mention again, Hike Attleboro. So we did do a presentation last week with Brian Hatch, and that is obviously an initiative between Attleboro Land Trust, Mass Audubon, and the City of Attleboro. So please go to either the Attleboro Land Trust Facebook page, or there is a Hike Attleboro website, and you can get more information on that. And also, if you haven't seen some of the past videos or interviews, I highly recommend going back and watching those, and those are on Facebook, the Attleboro Land Trust Facebook page, or the YouTube channel. So thank you so much to everyone watching, and to Nick. We really appreciate it, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for having me, Evan. Appreciate it.